tell you about an important announcement from the Indian Prime Minister's Twitter account. Last December, Mahendra Modi's 73 million Twitter followers were told something very important. India was adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. It was also announced that India was purchasing 500 Bitcoin to give away to the electorate, a gift from a country to its people. Now, you might not be surprised to learn that Prime Minister Modi's Twitter account had been hacked. Nor will you be surprised by the Force 10 Twitter storm that followed. Now, like many of you, I've taken a strong interest in digital currencies since their inception. And from both my professional and personal perspectives, I can say one thing for sure. The world has been awash in bipolar cryptocurrency fever. Through the pandemic, as some of you may have noticed, Bitcoin prices rose more than 5 times, and then they crashed. More recently, a token called Terra UST and its sister token Luna completely cratered, and it wiped out tens of billions of dollars of value. But the crypto, let's call it crypto sideshow, has been diverting our attention from something that's very important, a very important development. And that is that central banks around the world are debating the creation of digital versions of their banknotes and coins. These are known as central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. The latest Bank for International Settlements survey showed that 90% of the world's central banks are exploring the creation of digital versions of their currencies. And 50% of those are in the prototyping stage. China, Nigeria, the Bahamas, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, they've all launched live versions of central bank digital currencies, and there are going to be more to follow. Meanwhile, in January of this year, the Fed, the US Fed, issued a white paper that discussed the potential benefits and risks of creating a US digital currency. And in March, a few months after, President Biden issued an executive order that, in part, calls for the exploration of creating a central bank digital currency. But before going further on this topic, it's important to define what a CBDC actually is, because it gets very confusing. People hear about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and Ethereum, and let's talk about what this actually is. It's really simple. It is official government money, just like bills or coins that are issued by a nation's central bank. But the difference is that CBDCs are issued in digital rather than in physical form. So this isn't Apple Pay, this isn't Venmo, this isn't Bitcoin. It's very simple. It's digital government-issued cash. Okay? With me so far? All right. So now let's talk about financial inclusion and mobile money. By this I mean using your mobile phone to transact. We all do it to some degree or other, but in the developing markets, not the developed markets, they've been the most enthusiastic and earliest adopters of mobile money. People don't have bank accounts, but they may have 2, 3 cell phones. And the cell phone companies realize this, and they've created a system to allow people to transact with each other just using their cell phone. Now, people that don't have banks but do have cell phones don't want to carry large amounts of money with them, and not just for the sake of convenience, but also for the sake of security. Of the billions of cell phones purchased around the world, it's estimated that around half are in sub-Saharan Africa. And yep, they're being used to make mobile payments, but there's a bit of a problem. The various mobile payment options available to African consumers aren't interoperable. Well, let's give you an example. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the DRC, despite having 30 million mobile payment subscribers, the usage rate is really low. Why is that? And that's because the users of Airtel Money, that's one cell phone company, can't send money to users of rival Orange Money without a very costly and complicated reconciliation. So a digital Congolese franc, legally issued by the government, could help people that don't have bank accounts download an easy-to-use wallet on their phone and make transactions. And so governments are creating financial inclusion, and they can use it to buy things, and it's very, very useful in places that are very remote, such as in Africa. Corruption is another big issue. It's estimated that more than $80 billion leaves the African continent every year in illicit capital flight. $80 billion. That is equivalent to the amount of foreign direct investment that comes into Africa, as well as development assistance. So setting up a CBDC could dramatically improve the ability of a government to track illicit money flows. And will a CBDC completely stop illegal activity? Probably not, but it goes a long way to help. But for the moment, let's discuss how CBDCs can protect sovereignty. So former colonies around the world fought really hard to get their independence. And today, many of them are fighting very hard for monetary sovereignty. Until recently, France forced the reserve centralization of 8 of their former West African colonies. But now these countries have been freed to launch a regional currency along with some of their other neighbors in the economic community of the West African states. It's a bloc called ECOWAS. But even with this new victory in hand, could a new hegemonic power take over from the French? Well, enter China. China has a very impressive digital currency initiative, for starters. Secondly, they've got very powerful payments platforms like Alipay and WeChat. And third, they have an overwhelming market share in mobile smartphones. Now, could China exert and exploit these advantages and push African countries to issue digital currencies using Chinese standards? Well, judging from China's track record on the continent, including exerting a tremendous amount of political and diplomatic leverage and very aggressive lending practices, it's hard to imagine a scenario where China wouldn't press its advantages. But actually, it's inside of China where things get very interesting. Over the past decade, bills and coins have gradually disappeared in China, and they've been surrendered, they've been replaced by QR codes on cell phones. Even homeless people in China use them. This is a true story. I used to live in China, and today the homeless people show you a QR code and you have to send it to them that way. So after 8 years of work, though, the Chinese have finally launched a digital version of the Yuan. That's their currency. It's called the Yuan or the renminbi. And they launched it during the Beijing Olympics. The launch created some really big headlines, but it's also made a lot of people very nervous, right? Human rights organizations are expressing concern over the amount of control that the Chinese digital currency could have over the population. And democracy activists are concerned as well for a different reason. Could China possibly export their technology around the world to authoritarian regimes? Physical cash is what's known as a bearer instrument. Bearer instrument is if you bear it on your body, it's yours. Physical cash is also anonymous. You can do anonymous, unmonitored transactions. And while anonymous physical cash can create the potential for nefarious actors to exploit the system, think of the proverbial suitcase of cash, there are a lot of important reasons to preserve anonymity in the name of individual freedom. Digital currencies that are designed without anonymity protecting features, they might appear seductive in fighting criminal activity and crime, as I mentioned earlier, but the unfortunate reality is that they could also expand the ability of a government to peer into the citizens' everyday lives, into all of your lives. China's digital yuan is designed to enhance government control rather than protect individual liberties. And so we should expect that the Chinese Communist Party is going to use its digital currency to monitor all of its citizens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Some of you may also be familiar with what's known as the Chinese Social Credit Score. This isn't a Black Mirror episode. This is a real database that's already in existence in China, and it tracks individual and corporate behavior real time. People that comply with the Beijing Social Credit Score get rewarded. Those that don't get punished through losing a job or through travel restrictions or not getting into a certain school. So if you link a digital currency that's monitoring transactions 24/7 with a social credit score, you can imagine how much control a government is going to have over its people. Now, equally concerning is that China's digital currency architecture, what makes the technology that makes all of this work for their digital currency, has the potential to be exported abroad to dictatorial regimes around the world. Maybe they too appreciate the fact that digital money could be used as an instrument of control and surveillance. So think of the digital yuan not just as a payments tool, but also as a geopolitical weapon. Now, another concern that's been expressed by national security experts around the world is that the Chinese digital currency is part of a broader plan to give Beijing the offensive capacity to challenge the US dollar and its dominance in cross-border payments. Since the end of World War II, the US dollar has been the reserve currency. What does that mean? I'll simplify it to its most digestible form. A reserve currency basically means that central banks around the world have to hold it in reserves. Why? Well, maybe because of the strength of the US economy, but also because every commodity on earth, from soybeans to gold to copper to oil, they're all priced in US dollars. And Beijing has been actively working to undermine the dollar's dominance. And it's been doing this while promoting trade, investments, and loans along a very ambitious multi-trillion-dollar project known as the Belt and Road Initiative. This Belt and Road Initiative is a very ambitious program that connects China to more than 100 countries around the world. And China has been promoting trade, but it's also been loaning money to a lot of these countries. Now, the loans have been pretty problematic because many of these poor countries can't pay China back. Countries like Zambia or Sri Lanka. But given China's leverage over a number of these countries, it isn't inconceivable that China could renegotiate their loans, their billions and billions of loans to these various countries in return for something. And that something could be that they settle their commodities in the Chinese digital currency instead of in dollars. So the big picture here is that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the Chinese policy is to create a parallel payments network that slowly chips away at the dollar and elevates the yuan to the global stage. So let's summarize where we are. First, digital cash issued by governments, issued by central banks, is not just coming, it's here. The train has left the station. Number two, pretty much every central bank is either studying it, discussing, or in the process of launching central bank digital currencies. But China is by far the furthest along. And they've openly said that they want the yuan to be a global reserve currency. Now, it's an open question whether being the first to market digital money is going to give you reserve currency status. But the main issue is very clear. China is clearly leading the world in creating a global digital economy, and it wants to win. So we should be paying attention. So let me conclude with the following. A digital currency should reflect the values of its people and of its government. Democratic countries should imprint, if you will, what they stand for in their digital currencies. Things like privacy and individual freedom and freedom from government overreach. So we owe it to ourselves and to the next generation of people to create digital versions of our money that are used for individual empowerment and not state control. It's in our power to do this today, and both policymakers and average citizens should take notice. Thank you very much.